The less you care, the more they value you. The paradox of the week. Charles Bukowski. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. They taught you to be good, polite, kind. They told you to smile more, to apologize even when you weren't wrong, to be softer, quieter, smaller. You obeyed, not out of weakness, but out of love. You wanted to be accepted, to be liked, to be safe. So you bent. Then you bent again, and again, until one day you looked at yourself and didn't recognize the person standing there. Just a smile stitched onto silence. Approval is a sweet poison. It tastes like love at first, but then it starts to rot you from the inside. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You say yes when your whole body screams no. You forgive what should never be forgiven. And all the while, something deep inside you begins to burn. Not out of hatred, out of hunger. Hunger for truth. Hunger for your own voice. It starts early. A parent frowns. A teacher praises the quiet ones. Friends laugh when you speak your truth, so you learn to stay silent. You trade authenticity for safety. Bit by bit, you sell pieces of your soul in exchange for belonging. And everyone claps, because you're the good one, the easy one, the one who never makes a fuss. But there's a price for being liked by everyone. The price is you. You try to be light, always light. Never a burden, never the storm. But the storm is inside you, and it's growing. You keep it locked behind your ribs. You smile while it screams. And every time someone steps on your boundaries and you let them, the storm rages louder. You tell yourself it's better this way, that peace is worth the cost. But peace bought through self-betrayal isn't peace. It's surrender. You become a mask, a pleasant blur. Everyone loves the version of you they think is real, but no one really sees you. Not the wild parts, not the sacred chaos, not the sharp edges. They love your silence. They love your compliance. They love your absence, disguised as presence. And the worst part, you help them. You serve your own erasure, because you're scared that if you show them the real you, they'll leave. And maybe they will. But maybe that's not the tragedy you think it is. Because a love that demands your disappearance isn't love, it's consumption. The world has a strange relationship with authenticity. It admires it from a distance, but it punishes it up close. People say they want real, but what they really want is familiar, comfortable, controlled. And the real you is none of those things. The real you is unpredictable, deep, fierce, untamed. So you become a watered-down version of yourself just to fit. But even then, you don't fit. You shrink, and they still say you take up too much space. You play small, and they call you weak. You speak up, and they call you too much. There's no winning this game. The rules are rigged, and the longer you play, the more you lose yourself. At some point, something inside you snaps, quietly. No drama, just a silent shift. You stop caring about being liked, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You finally understand. The cost of constant approval is too high. You can't afford to keep paying with your soul. That's when the illusion breaks. You realize that the love you were chasing was conditional, that the people who loved you the most were often the ones who asked you to be the least, that your softness was only safe when it served them, and your strength was only tolerated when it was quiet. You see it clearly now. The world doesn't respect those who disappear to please others. It uses them, praises them, then forgets them. But those who stand in their truth, even if their voice shakes, those are the ones who are remembered. Not always loved, but remembered. And in that remembering, there is power. You don't need to be everything for everyone. You only need to be real, fully, boldly, unapologetically. Because the world doesn't need another mask. It needs presence. It needs truth. And your truth No matter how inconvenient, no matter how raw is your power. They won't like you when you choose yourself, but they will remember you. And somewhere deep down, even the ones who once tried to shape you will feel something shift. Respect. Because the world doesn't value those who dissolve. It fears and reveres the ones who rise. It doesn't happen with a scream. It happens in silence. One day, you simply stop. Stop chasing, stop proving, stop bending yourself into a shape that fits someone else's story. There's no dramatic scene, no final word. Just the sound of something ancient inside you unclenching, like a chain slipping off your spine. For the first time, you breathe. Not shallow, polite breaths, but something deeper. You exhale a version of yourself you no longer need, and the world doesn't notice, but you do. You feel it like a shift in gravity. That's not cruelty. That's not becoming hard. It's becoming honest. You're not numb. You're clear. You finally see how much energy you've wasted on trying to be understandable to people who never tried to understand you. How many times you held your tongue, lowered your gaze, softened your edges, and for what? So they wouldn't feel uncomfortable around your truth, so they could keep loving the illusion. There's a kind of freedom that tastes like stillness. You don't argue anymore. You don't try to explain. You let silence speak for you, not because you've given up, but because you've arrived at yourself. At the place where you no longer seek permission to exist as you are. People call it cold, but it's warmth redirected inward. You're not closing off. You're closing in, protecting the parts of you that are sacred, no longer offering them up for cheap approval. When you stop playing the role, others panic. You stop being predictable. You stop being controllable. They used to rely on your compliance. Now they find themselves speaking to someone they don't quite recognize. And that's exactly the point. You were never meant to be a mirror for their comfort. You were meant to be a fire, not to destroy, but to reveal. And now, the fire is lit. They will call you distant. They will say you've changed, and they'll be right. You've changed directions, turned inward, chosen stillness over noise, presence over performance. You've stopped reaching, stopped shrinking. You're no longer asking for a seat at a table that feeds off your silence. You're building your own table, and maybe you'll eat alone. But the taste of self-respect is richer than any feast bought with betrayal. This is not indifference. This is reclamation. There's a part of you you've been hiding your whole life, not because it's evil, but because someone, somewhere, told you it was too much, too loud, too angry, too wild. So you buried it. Deep, under smiles, under habits, under everything you were told you're supposed to be. And it didn't die. It waited. That part of you, the one that feels, that wants, that burns, it became your shadow. And no matter how much light you tried to become, the shadow followed. You've been taught to fear that shadow, to call it wrong. You've learned to believe that your darkness makes you unworthy, that your rage is dangerous, that your sexual energy is shameful, that your sadness is weakness. But the truth is this: your shadow isn't the problem. The lie you tell to hide it is. The shadow is made of everything you suppressed to survive. The words you didn't say, the instincts you denied, the boundaries you let be crossed, the fury you swallowed. All that energy didn't vanish. It turned inward. It shaped how you see yourself, how you let others treat you, how you shrink in rooms that need your presence. And the longer you pretend it's not there, the louder it becomes. Until one day, it breaks through, not with elegance, but with rawness. It doesn't ask for permission. It demands truth. That's not destruction. That's integration. The shadow doesn't want to ruin you. It wants to be heard, held, understood. It wants to come home, because it is you, the full, unapologetic, undivided you. Not the version you learned to perform, but the version that was born before you learned how to hide. The parts you've been ashamed of, they carry your power. The rage you silence could be your boundary. The desire you repress could be your fire. The sadness you numb could be your depth. Every shadow is a door. Every rejection of self is a missed invitation to wholeness. You were never meant to be just light. You were meant to be a sky full of weather, sun and storm, calm and chaos. And only when you embrace both do you become whole. You think control keeps you safe, but control is a cage. You think perfection will earn you love, but perfection is sterile. What draws people to you is the pulse, the hum beneath the surface, the truth that doesn't beg to be liked, the presence that doesn't apologize for existing. When you meet your shadow without fear, something changes. You stop seeking saviors. You stop blaming the world. You start owning it, all of it. The joy, the pain, the fire, the stillness. You stop needing to be good. You start needing to be real. That's when you start to see others clearly too. Not through the lens of need, but through the clarity of truth. You see how many people are running from themselves. How much of the world is just unhealed pain pretending to be normal. You no longer feel the urge to fix them. You no longer feel responsible for their comfort. You begin to realize that your only task, the only real one, is to stay true to yourself, even if that self changes. Especially then, you become dangerous in the best way. Not because you harm, but because you can't be controlled. Not because you dominate, but because you're no longer available for roles that silence your soul. You're no longer auditioning for a love that requires your absence. You've chosen presence, and presence is power. People will feel that. Some will pull away. Others will be drawn to you like moths to a flame. Not because you're performing, but because you're alive, fully, not hiding, not explaining, not asking, just being. And the paradox is this. When you stop trying to be lovable, you become magnetic, not for everyone, but for those who matter, for those who see not just your light, but your shadow, and choose to stay. That's not weakness, that's alchemy. There comes a moment when the noise fades, the people drift, the phone goes quiet, and you're left alone. Not the kind of alone that feels like punishment, a deeper kind, the kind that strips you bare. At first it feels like loss, like absence, like silence pressing against your chest. But stay there long enough and something else emerges. Not fear, not emptiness, clarity. You begin to hear your own voice, the one that's been drowned out by the world's expectations. And it doesn't whisper, it roars. We spend so much time avoiding solitude. We keep ourselves busy, distracted, surrounded, as if being alone means being unloved. But that's a lie. Solitude is not the enemy. It's the initiation into truth, into depth, into the parts of yourself that only speak when no one else is around to interrupt. When you stop filling the space, you start to feel. And yes, it can hurt. Old griefs resurface, unprocessed emotions rise, but that pain is honest. It's the body asking to be listened to. It's the soul cleaning house. In the silence, you meet yourself, without the masks, without the noise. You see who you are when no one is watching, not the version you offer the world, the raw one, the tired one, the aching, longing, restless one. And maybe for the first time, you offer that version your presence, not to fix, just to witness, to say, I see you, I'm not leaving. You become your own anchor, your own mirror, your own home. Loneliness stops being loneliness when you stop abandoning yourself. People talk about healing like it happens in groups, in movement, in connection. And yes, sometimes it does. But the deepest kind, the kind that changes you from the inside out, that happens in the quiet, in the long nights, in the stillness no one applauds. It happens when you're sitting with your own breath, your own past, your own patterns. And you choose, again and again, to stay. Not run, not numb. Stay. Feel it all. Let it move through you. Let it burn what needs to burn. Eventually, you start to notice something strange. The longer you spend with yourself, the less lonely you feel. Not because the world changes, but because your relationship with yourself deepens. You no longer seek people to distract you from your wounds. You seek people who can meet you in your wholeness. You no longer beg to be chosen. You already chose yourself. And from that place, you connect. Not from emptiness, from overflow. Solitude builds something no crowd can give you. Sovereignty. A rootedness in your own being. A confidence that doesn't need to be loud. A presence that doesn't perform. You no longer ask the world to reflect your worth. You carry it with you, quietly, steadily. And others feel it. Some are drawn in, others retreat. That's not your concern anymore. You're not performing for applause. You're living in alignment. Healing is not a lightning strike. It's a slow remembering of who you were before the world told you who to be. And that remembering often happens in empty rooms, in unanswered prayers, in the hollow spaces that once terrified you. That's where your roots grow. That's where your voice returns. That's where your power wakes up. The beauty is, once you've tasted that kind of solitude, you never settle for chaos again. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop clinging to connections that drain you. You stop begging for crumbs. You'd rather be alone with peace than surrounded in confusion. That's not loneliness. That's discernment. Eventually, you realize you were never really alone. You just hadn't been home to yourself in a long time. Now you are. And from here, everything begins. At some point, you stop explaining yourself. Not out of pride, out of peace. You stop correcting the stories people tell about you. You stop trying to prove your intentions. You let misunderstanding exist without rushing to fix it. Because you understand now, clarity inside is more valuable than validation outside. And when you carry that clarity, you become untouchable. Not because nothing hurts you, but because nothing hooks you. You are no longer available for battles that drain your soul. That's what real indifference feels like. Not coldness, not spite, stillness. A calm refusal to be pulled back into games you've outgrown. You don't chase anymore. You don't beg. You don't argue for your worth. You've tasted the freedom of not needing to be understood by everyone. You don't need to be seen by blind eyes. You don't need to be loved by those who only love what you give them. You don't need to be chosen when you've already chosen yourself. People notice. They don't always know what's changed. They say you feel different, more distant, less emotional. But it's not distance. It's self-possession. It's the energy of someone who no longer leaks. You no longer offer pieces of yourself in exchange for attention. You no longer perform emotional labor to keep others comfortable. You show up fully or not at all. And that shift breaks the dynamic. The old patterns collapse because they depended on your participation. The moment you stop being driven by the need to be liked, your life opens. You begin to say no without guilt. You walk away without drama. You hold your boundaries not as walls but as doors. Selective, intentional, sacred. You allow people to feel whatever they feel about your truth. You no longer try to manage their emotions or opinions. You're done twisting yourself to fit into frames that were never meant to hold you. This kind of indifference is not apathy. It's power. It's the choice to place your energy where it returns something real. It's the wisdom to stop pouring into cups with holes. It's the courage to stop investing in connections that only survive when you abandon yourself. You understand now, love without freedom is a cage, and attention bought with self-betrayal is poison. You used to overthink everything, every tone, every pause, every look, wondering if you were too much, too little, too soft, too strong. Now you rest, not because you've figured it all out, but because you no longer believe your worth is up for negotiation. You exist as you are. And that's enough. Some will find it intimidating. Others will find it magnetic. That's not your concern. You're not curating yourself anymore. You've stopped trying to be everything for everyone. You've stopped making your body a home for others while leaving yourself out in the cold. You've stopped shrinking to fit into stories that were never written for you. You're not cruel. You're clear. You don't ghost people. You just stop feeding what no longer grows. You stop explaining your silence. You stop dressing up your exits. You don't owe performance to those who only applaud when you're pleasing. Something wild happens when you become indifferent in this way. People begin to crave your energy, not because you're playing games, but because your detachment reveals their dependence. You hold nothing. You grip nothing. You allow things to be what they are. And in that space, people start showing you who they really are, not who they pretend to be for your affection. You watch the dynamic shift. The one who used to take you for granted starts circling back. The one who dismissed your softness starts missing your presence. But you don't bite. You don't go back. Because you understand that what they miss is not you. It's their access to a version of you that no longer exists. You're not punishing anyone. You're just done negotiating your peace. You've stopped trying to fit into rooms that require you to abandon your truth. You'd rather be alone in alignment than surrounded in distortion. That's not arrogance. That's survival. That's growth. You understand now. People love you most when they feel they can lose you. But you no longer move from fear. You no longer cling. You love from fullness or not at all. You give from overflow or not at all. You engage from truth or not at all. Your indifference becomes your filter. It cleans your space. It reveals who's there for you and who's there for what you provide. It ends cycles. It interrupts codependency. It creates space for something real, something mutual, something honest. And yes, some will leave. Let them. Some will say you've changed. Let them. Some will test your boundaries. Let them see how firm they are. This is not a test you take. This is who you are now, rooted, whole, free. Indifference is not the absence of love. It's the presence of self-love so deep that you no longer bleed for what doesn't bleed for you. There's a silence that doesn't come from absence. It comes from presence so full, it no longer needs to speak. You reach this silence not by avoiding the world, but by walking through it until the noise no longer touches you, until opinions lose their grip, until your story no longer shakes in other people's hands. You arrive there when you've emptied yourself of pretending, when you've stopped chasing meaning in broken mirrors, when you no longer look outside for what must be built inside. Real power doesn't perform. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for recognition. It moves quietly, steadily. It radiates from the center. You walk into a room and don't need to say a word. The energy speaks for you, not because it's loud, but because it's stable. And stability, in a world built on reaction, feels like revolution. You're no longer pulled into every storm. You watch, you feel, but you don't lose yourself in the tide. You've stopped explaining your silence. You've stopped rushing to fill empty space. You've realized that some of the most powerful things live in what's unspoken. Not everything sacred needs to be shared. Not every insight needs to be declared. You hold more now than you express, not because you're withholding, but because you've become selective, disciplined, aware of your own energy, and who deserves to witness it. This kind of silence isn't isolation, it's alignment. You no longer chase connection for validation. You attract resonance through presence. You stop trying to convince anyone of your worth. You stop chasing closure from those who can't give it. You sit with what is. You breathe through what hurts. You own what's yours. You let go of what isn't. And in doing so, you become light. Not the kind that blinds, the kind that steadies. You learn to hold tension. Not everything needs resolution. Not every conflict needs closure. Sometimes, power is knowing when to speak and when to leave the room, when to fight and when to surrender, when to wait and when to move. This discernment doesn't come from intellect. It comes from silence. The silence that teaches you how to hear your own voice beneath the noise of the world. People will ask where you went, why you've become so quiet. But this quiet is not withdrawal, it's return. A return to what matters, to the pulse beneath performance, to the breath beneath expectation. You're no longer interested in being loud to be seen. You're interested in being clear enough to be felt. And the people who can feel that, they come closer, the rest drift. And that's exactly as it should be. You stop needing to prove your growth. You stop documenting your healing. You stop explaining your boundaries. You don't share your shifts for validation. You live them. You embody them. You become the shift. And those who are meant to understand will, without you having to say a single word. This is where you live now, in the deep center, in the quiet knowing, in the kind of stillness that can't be shaken. You're not moved by surface chaos. You've met yourself in too many dark nights to fear storms. You've built a home in your own soul, and from there, you watch the world. Not with detachment, but with rooted grace. You feel more, but you react less. You see more, but you speak less. Not because you don't care, but because you've learned what truly deserves your attention. True strength is restraint. True maturity is silence. True presence is stillness. You're no longer pulled into wars that aren't yours. You're no longer tempted by empty noise. You're no longer distracted by shiny illusions. You move different now. You walk slower. You listen longer. You choose with care. Your life is not a stage. It's a sanctuary. This silence is sacred, not because it's quiet, but because it's clean, empty of noise, full of truth. It's the place you return to when the world forgets itself, the place where your inner compass resets, where your real voice speaks, not in words, in knowing. And in that knowing, you stand, grounded, clear, unshakable. Not because you've won, but because you've stopped needing to. This is where power is born, not in the battle, in the stillness after. Most people never wake up. They live in loops. Same thoughts, same emotions, same reactions, day after day. They think they're choosing, but they're repeating. Running on scripts written by fear, survival, and old stories they never questioned. The tragedy isn't that they're asleep. It's that they think they're awake. That's the first illusion you have to break. Believing that awareness is automatic. It's not. Awareness is a skill, and like any skill, it must be practiced. The first tool is what I call the inner monitor. It's the quiet observer that lives just behind your thoughts. Most people never access it because they're too merged with their reactions. But you can train yourself to step back, not out of detachment, but out of presence. When you feel triggered, pause. Just pause. Before you speak, before you explain, before you defend. That pause is the doorway. In that gap, you see the program running. And when you see it, you're no longer it. Practice this. Before every action, insert a breath. Not a big dramatic breath. A subtle, intentional one. That breath tells your system, I'm here, I'm choosing, not reacting. And over time, that breath becomes a signal, a micro reset. It interrupts the default and invites the deliberate. That's where power starts. Not in what you do, but in how you return to the moment before the doing. Another secret, your body always knows before your mind does. Your posture, your breath, your gut. They carry messages that never lie. Learn to scan yourself. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched, stomach uneasy. Don't override that. Don't silence it. These are internal notifications. You've just been taught to ignore them. When you reconnect with your body, you reconnect with reality. Not the imagined version in your head, the living one beneath your skin. Stillness is not about sitting still. It's about no longer running from yourself. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you learn to be still inside while the world keeps spinning. That stillness sharpens your senses. You begin to feel what others miss. You hear what's beneath their words. You see the structure behind the chaos. You speak less, but your words cut deeper. You act less, but your presence influences more. You become a mirror, a tuning fork, a field that others enter and feel something shift, even if they don't know why. People think power is volume, movement, noise, but the deepest influence comes from resonance, and resonance is built in silence, in discipline, in what you no longer need to prove. That's why the most impactful people rarely shout. They've tuned themselves so cleanly that their very being transmits signal. No drama, just presence, no need to dominate, just gravity. Here's another tool: simplicity. Most people overcomplicate their inner work. They seek 1,000 answers. They fill notebooks. But transformation doesn't come from quantity. It comes from precision. One clear decision, fully embodied, can reroute your entire life. Choose one habit, one posture, one sentence you stop saying, one thing you stop tolerating, and live it fully. That will do more than 100 books. Start small. Start now. Don't wait for clarity to come from thinking. It comes from movement. Presence is built in the doing, but not frantic doing, clean doing, deliberate, grounded. You don't need to change everything. You need to stop leaving yourself. Every time you stay, in discomfort, in silence, in honesty, you build a new code, and that code reshapes your identity. And finally, let go of the need to be seen while you shift. Real change happens off stage. Let it. Don't announce. Don't explain. Don't decorate your growth. Protect it. Let your energy change before your words do. Let your alignment speak. Let the old you fade quietly while the new one roots deeper. There's no rush. The world catches up eventually. This is the hidden technology. Not external, internal, not loud, subtle. But once activated, everything begins to move. People respond to your stillness differently. Circumstances reorganize. You stop pushing and start attracting. You stop convincing and start becoming. That's the shift. That's the secret. The world doesn't change when you fight it harder. It changes when you tune yourself deeper. Because your life is always mirroring your signal. Adjust the frequency, and the whole reality shifts. There comes a time when the seeking ends, not because you've found everything, but because you've stopped running from yourself. You've circled the maze, burned the old identities, shed the performances, and now you're here, still, quiet, clear, not empty, full, not loud, tuned. The noise of needing fades, the pressure to prove dissolves, and something deeper rises. Not a role, not a goal, but a state, a frequency. You are no longer trying to become something. You are embodying what already lives within you. The wisdom, the presence, the depth. It's all there, always has been. But now, without the clutter of performance, it moves freely. You walk differently, not with arrogance, but with gravity. You no longer chase outcomes. You magnetize alignment. You no longer beg to be seen. You radiate clarity. This is the return, not to who you were, but to who you are when nothing is missing. When silence isn't avoidance, but communion. When stillness isn't stuck, but sovereign. When your life is not a performance, but a transmission. You speak only when it serves truth. You move only when it serves purpose. You rest without guilt. You act without fear, because you're no longer operating from lack. You're channeling presence. And that presence shifts everything. People feel it before they understand it. They sense the boundary without you drawing it. They feel the standard without you stating it. They respect the energy, not because you demand it, but because you've become it. You are no longer a request. You are a signal. The world keeps moving, but you're not moved. You flow, you adapt, you sense, but you don't collapse. You've become stable in the core, and from that core, you create, you connect, you contribute, not to get something, but because it overflows. That's the mark of someone who's returned to themselves. They give from abundance, not from hunger. No one can give this to you, no title, no relationship, No status. This is self-earned, self-witnessed, self-held, the result of thousands of unseen moments where you stayed, where you listened, where you chose integrity over impulse. And now, all of it lives in your field, not as theory, as embodiment. You don't need to say you've changed, you are the change. You don't need to announce your arrival. You've been here all along. This is your signal. Let it speak. Let it lead. Let it live. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.